Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Thursday morning business chat. And this is October 21st, and I'm Gregory, and very excited about our special speaker today and our special topic on time management. And Robin's going to explain how time management is really kind of an oxymoron because you can't really manage time. It's just there, but we can manage ourselves and how we use our time. So Robin, it was enlightening for me to learn about Quadrant 2 and why we want to be in Quadrant 2, but I know you're going to explain all four quadrants, so I'm going to zip the lip and turn it over to you, sweetheart. And you're muted, so we'll hear you better when you unmute.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our business chat. And so, I'm going to share something this morning that's had a huge impact on my life and made a major difference to me. So just a little bit of history. Back in 1988, believe it or not, I was privileged to work with the Covey Leadership Center and help launch the now internationally famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. At the time, people didn't have a clue what that was unless you were in the Mormon church. And now, then what happened was, in addition to launching the book, I was living in San Diego, and Stephen would come to town regularly, and I was the one who picked him up at the airport, got him settled in his hotel, designed his schedule of meetings, media interviews, and programs. And I noticed something very interesting. Early on, I noticed that I was taking really careful care of planning his schedule, much more detailed than I ever planned my own. I made sure he had time for exercise, for meditation, for planning, time to be social, and time to work. And then a light bulb went off in my head, and I went, oh. And in the 7 habits, one of the very beginning things that we would do.
You actually muted yourself.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I don't know what you missed, but when this light bulb went off of what I was doing, I realized, okay, Stephen said, teach what you want to learn. And I realized that what I was doing for him, I wasn't doing for myself. So I became quite a student of habit 3. And for those of you that are not familiar with the 7 habits, this is the book. And it is a very famous book at this point. I think next to the Bible, it's one of the great publishing success stories in the world. And it's in many languages all over the world. And habit 3 is what we're going to talk about today. We're not going to talk about all the habits, but habit 3 is about how to live your life in alignment with your values. And like Gregory said, they don't even use the term time management because everyone has the same amount. We all have 24 hours in a day. How come some people are more effective than others? And it's not about managing our time. It's like what Gregory said, it's our relationship with time. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And just a little brief overview of the 7 habits is it's really the principles of, personal and organizational effectiveness. So today we're just going to talk about personal. And Gregory, why don't you bring up the first slide, and we're going to give an introduction to the Quadrant 2 time management system. And the basic foundation of time management is the distinction between urgent, not urgent, important, and not important. So on the top left, where it says urgent and important, those are things that you have to deal with immediately. And we call those firefighting. And you've just got to deal with them. Quadrant 2 is to the right, and that is not urgent and important. So those are things you need to develop. That's your quality time. That's where you get your greatest leverage. Quadrant 3 is down below Quadrant 1, where it's not important and urgent. We're going to get into detail of each one of these, where these are distractions. These are things that show up and you don't necessarily, they're not necessarily important, but they're right in your face. And we'll talk about those. And then Quadrant 4 are time wasters. So what we want to do is really, really take a look at how do we use our time and where's our time spent. And one of the things we had people do early on is do a journal of how you spend your time in 15-minute blocks. And I know several of you were in Terry Werner's program on Empowered Vision, and she talked about time blocking. And this is a really valuable contribution to what we're talking about today, because as we know, we all have the same hours in the day. So how can we influence how we spend our time? Why is it that some people can accomplish so much when other people don't? It really is, where do you spend your time and in which quadrant? So Gregory, why don't you bring on the next slide, and then we're going to go into detail on each one of these. And then as we're doing this, I invite each of you to think about your life, how you spend your time on a daily basis, and what quadrant that's in. And so I will give you this homework to really pay attention, heighten your awareness of doing what you're doing. And I'm going to give some examples on each one. And I'm going to have this be interactive if you want, if you have a question, if you want to ask, what quadrant would this be in? We can go into that. So the first quadrant, urgent and important. So if you have a crisis or an emergency, let's say you have a flat tire and you got to deal with it. You know, you can't just not deal with it. So if it's, we got some extra noise there. I'm gonna mute your line, who's ever making the noise. Thank you. Appreciate that. So when, oh, now I have a big black screen on the screen, honey. I can see your screen, that big black thing. Thank you. Okay, so when you get a flat tire, you got to deal with it. If you get a call, like our assistant Bethany got the other day, that her child is sick and she had to go pick him up at school. So these are things that are just right there in your face, and you have to deal with them. You've got a deadline. You've got last minute preparations. Like, we're getting ready to get on a plane tomorrow. Well, if we're not packed, that's urgent and important to get everything ready to get to the airport. So in our business, what would be some examples of urgent and important? Anyone have an idea in our business? I'm gonna get rid of this. And you can use the chat, or you can unmute your line, because we are on our chat. So people can unmute. If you have an idea, please feel free to share. And yes, these slides, Diana, are available. You can just do a search online and they'll show up. Just put in quadrant 2 time management and images, and you'll pick these up right away, but happy to share them with you. So in our business, what would be a quadrant 1 when it's urgent and important?
I have a suggestion for that.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Becky. And I've had an urgent and important week because we have a Super Saturday coming up in Phoenix on Saturday. So I've felt it urgent and important to let all the local people that I haven't gotten around to prospecting yet prospected, so that they
Okay, well, that's kind of a combination of 1 and 2. When it comes down to, you know, right before the event, and you forgot to, you know, invite your most important prospect, then it becomes urgent. That's great, Kay. Thank you. Thank you. So other things in our business, let's say you've got, like I had an urgent and important today because we had this call with David Schmidt, and I had to make sure I was ready for this and ready for that, so I could be present on both events. And so that was right there. If you've got, you know, one of your people calls and something happened to them and they can't make an important call, it's urgent and important, and you got to step in and be there for them. So that's an idea of urgent and important. So now we're going to look at not urgent and important, and this is quadrant 2, and it's called quadrant 2 time management for a reason. This is when we take the time. It's not urgent, so it's not pressing on us, but it's very important to take the time to plan, to prevent. You know, if you don't take care of your car, if you don't change the oil regularly, or you run out of oil, or you have a flat tire because you haven't, I'm so grateful because Gregory's always monitoring my tires and takes care of the oil change. But if you don't do those, then you end up with crises. So if you put more time in quadrant 2, you have less urgent and important. Quadrant 1 happens, but you can lessen quadrant 1 by taking the time in quadrant 2, taking care of our bodies. If we don't take care of our bodies, what happens? Not good things. So this is really, really valuable, planning and preparing and preventing things. So taking care of our physical world, our possessions, our bodies, our relationships, taking the time to spend with people that are most important, taking the time to listen, being with your children, having quality time. The statistics of quality time that kids get with their parents, I don't know the exact number right now, but it's minutes a day, minutes, versus I remember what Stephen Covey would do. He has 9 children. Well, he's passed, but he still has 9 children, but he's gone. And every month he would make an appointment. He'd have a date with each one of his 9 children, and it was their time to be with their dad, undivided attention, no phones, no meetings, just totally doing what they wanted to do with him. Quality time with the people that are important to you, taking the time to really listen to people and not multitasking. True recreation and relaxation. I mean, sometimes people think, oh, I can't stop. I just got to be busy all the time. Well, that is going to lead to more quadrant 1s. Really taking the time for true recreation. So let's say you want to watch a really good movie on TV, and you watch the movie and it's great and it's true recreation and relaxation and you're fulfilled with it, but you have this magnet at the bottom of your butt and you're stuck to the couch and you keep watching other things and other things. And that quadrant 2 shifted out of quadrant 2 into quadrant 4, which we're going to get to in just a minute. So let's go to quadrant 3. Now notice these things are urgent, but not important. These might be things that are important to other people. They could be someone interrupts you. Sometimes you hear that ding that you've got mail, or you've got a message coming in or whatever, or the phone rings. We don't have to answer the phone when it rings. A matter of fact, I keep my phone on mute a lot. If I'm working on something, so I can stay focused on it. But interruptions from other people, some kind of meetings are quadrant 3. We still have some noise, honey. Could you mute the lines, please? Thank you. I don't know who's making the noise, but please mute your line. Thank you so much. Okay. And, it could be pressing matters for someone else, but not for you. Some popular things that we do could be urgent, but not important. Who's got some ideas of what might be urgent, but not important in our business? Anyone? Okay. Emails. Yes, Barbara. Yes. They show up, there they are, it's like, oh my gosh. Especially I have one of those big phones, so you can see it even bigger and a message pops through. That's a great example, and it happens all the time. And then it throws us off into spending time in something that is not necessarily a leveraged activity. And then finally, quadrant 4 is the busy work. It's where people actually waste time. It's like when you're sitting on the couch after that wonderful movie that really provided relaxation and enjoyment, but then you started watching junk. It shifted from quadrant 2 to quadrant 4. Sometimes phone conversations start out as a quadrant 2. They're very valuable. You're on purpose. You're discussing important things. And then it shifts into someone whining or complaining. And this can happen in our business. And I have a rule that I just do: no whining, no whining, no whining. Whining's not allowed. And that's one of my qualities and characteristics. I want people that don't whine. If people are victims, if people are complaining about other people, if people aren't taking responsibility and they're complaining about stuff, that's a quadrant 4 activity. These are total time wasters. There are some calls, there are some emails. It's easy to, when there's so much information out there, it's easy to get lost in some of those that just eat up your precious, precious time. It is our most valuable resource. Once it's gone, we can't get it back. We only have so much. So what is it that makes people different than other people? And so what I want to do is actually talk about leverage. In our business model, we have leverage. We have the opportunity as an average person to leverage our time and resources and people. And that's one of the great things about our profession is we have an opportunity to develop residual income. We have an opportunity to leverage ourselves through other people. And so if we're really using quadrant 2, we can have a lot more accomplished in a day's time. So what I want to do is kind of play a little game with you. And those of you that have heard this before know this one. So you get to be quiet and let other people answer. Let's say you're investing $10 and you put $10 into quadrant 1. It's urgent and important. Does anyone have any idea how much you'd get back? $10. So it's, you're not making any money, but you're not losing any money. It's something you've got to do. But quadrant 3, if you put $10 in, what do you think happens to that? These are not important activities. Remember, our focus is on what's important. Anyone want to guess? You can put it in the chat, or I'll just tell you. If you invest $10 in quadrant 3, it shrinks. You got it, Diane. Exactly. It goes down to $5. So $10 ends up being less. Now, $10 in quadrant 4, which are total time wasters, guess what? You've lost your money. You've wasted the time. You get nothing back. You got it. Thank you, Michelle. It's a 0. But let's take a look at what happens when you put time into quadrant 2. You put $10 into quadrant 2. It's the most leveraged of all the quadrants. Someone says it doubles. Keep going. That's an answer. What else? It's going to be more because it's leveraged. $10. $10. Anyone else? Going once, going twice? Okay. $10 in quadrant 2 actually comes back to $1,000. $1,000. So when you think about it, if you put a little teeny bit of time, you get a whole lot more back. I mean, how many times have we been waiting in line at the bank, in traffic, somewhere else waiting on hold? What could you be doing that is a leveraged activity? Something really simple. You can take the time in your mind to envision what you want to create. You can, give yourself some quiet time and just go deep and take some deep breaths. There's lots of things you can be doing in those little few minutes in quadrant 2 when it could have been a total time waster. You could be listening to something very uplifting and fulfilling, something that feeds your soul. If you're waiting, you could make an important phone call. You can check in with, someone important, say, just checking in. I have a friend and we do this fun little thing with each other. We call each other and leave a message and just say, I just called to say, I love you. And that's it. How long did that take? And what a difference does that make? If you get a call like that. Yes, waiting for a train, I take deep breaths. That's a wonderful thing. Thank you, Michelle. So really be living in the question of how can you be spending more time in quadrant 2 and less time in quadrant 3 and 4. Quadrant 1's going to happen, but if you do take the time to, care for your possessions and your body and your relationships, you're going to have a lot less disasters. Let's say you haven't done a really good job of, connecting with a child. And then all of a sudden they're off the rails on the deep end and you go, what happened? Because you didn't really realize what was going on. And what's beautiful about this is the more time you spend in quadrant 2, the less crisis you actually have. The more you say no to quadrant 3 and 4, the more you get to live the life that really reflects what's most important to you. So what I'd like to do is open things up now, because we like to, do a short presentation, then open up for some interaction. So if you have questions, if you have comments, please unmute your lines, and I am here. Okay.
I have a thought that's been going through my head because I have another job and I've been doing a lot of LifeWave, and then there's that non-urgent, super important stuff. And I notice that I substitute in number 3. When someone I love calls, I just pause everything and make time. And I realize that then I'm short on time to fulfill deadlines in my other job. And, so it's, I notice the kind of paradox in my head of where I get caught in the name of important when maybe the timing isn't important, so
That was a powerful distinction, Jennifer, really powerful, because if you're time blocking and you're focused on your work, whatever it may be, and then someone important calls, you get to develop this muscle. Is this the right time, or do you just send a message, say, looking forward to talking to you in a half hour or something? So you take care of, and this is self-care first, and that's a challenge for a lot of people. So, my invitation to everyone is to pay attention, really, really pay attention when you're spending, how you're spending your time in your day. And then, use what we have as humans that animals don't have, is the power to choose. Is it the right choice to do X, Y, or Z? So that's a really powerful awareness, Jennifer. Thank you for that. And it will come back. And, people, one of the most valuable things we can do in our business when we call someone and saying, do you have a few minutes? Is this a good time? Because a lot of times people pick up the phone even when it's not a good time, because they're in that quadrant 3 situation. The phone rings, they pick it up, and it may not be a good time. And people are so grateful when they say, it really isn't. And so they feel respected that you've taken the time to ask that. And they say, let's set up something that works for both of us. And that can make a huge difference. So you're being respectful of someone who's important, but also you're respecting yourself. And it's like what happened with me and Covey. When Stephen would come to town, I was taking much better care of him than I did myself. And that was a huge awakening for me. And that was like, okay, I need to start teaching this. So I started teaching this program long before the book came out. And there is a whole book on this for those of you that love to be students. It's called First Things First. And it is all about quadrant 2, if you want to really take a deep dive into it. And there's lots of stuff available online. You can find YouTubes on all of this. It's very, very present out there, but it's our relationship with time and how we spend it. So, who's next? Yes, Gregory, you want to ask
I'd
something?
like to say something, and kind of flowing off what Jennifer was talking about. And when people call, someone important calls, and I'm in the middle of something, sometimes I'll just hit that little button. Sorry, can't talk right now, but maybe, I've got a little bit of window. And so I'll pick up the phone and say, hey, hi there. How you doing? Hey, blah, blah, blah. I've only got a moment. If you got a quick question, I can probably answer, but if you want to have a chat, could we talk later? And because sometimes people just have, hey, quick question, da, 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 da. Okay, yes, no, do this, do that. Cool, thanks very much. Boom. Or maybe they got a 3-way call, right? Hey, look, I've got a 3-way. I got so-and-so on the line. And I stop almost everything for 3-way calls, okay? So if it's a 3-way call, I'm in. But I do recommend, if you've got to do a 3-way with your upline, send them a text and say, are you available for a 3-way? Because if you do that to me or Robin or any of your upline, and we'll respond, say, sure, or how about in 10 minutes? But, I try and screen my calls to not have these big interruptions, quadrant 3 interruptions, but being respectful for people that may have just need a quick answer. And since we're not in an office together and they can pop their head over and say, hey, blah, 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 we're doing this virtual business together. So I just wanted to point that out, that you can control your time and also be respectful. And sometimes it's just giving somebody a moment of time for a quick answer.
That's great, Gregory. Thank you for bringing that up. I see that Paul's got his hand up. You want to unmute? Oh, there you are, Paul.
It's Valerie. How are
Hi,
you doing
Val. Oh,
today?
hello, Valerie. I'm so excited to see you.
I know, I'm looking forward to it. I just want to give a shout out and just praise my father. I love it when he lines things up. I just ordered this and just got it, I think, last week. I'm so excited. I just love you, and I'm really looking forward to digesting this. So perfect timing. That's all.
Well, that's so wonderful. And for those of you that have never read the 7 Habits book, it's brilliant. And because I really had the privilege of sharing it weekly in a class, and it was a 7-week class where we went through, and we had corporate participants. And at the end, people would say, I wish it would have been more open. This is really good stuff. And this was before the book came out, when I was able to facilitate and teach the 7 Habits. And the more I did it, the deeper it got and the more brilliant it became, because I realized this is truly how everything integrates with everything else. And it's changed my life dramatically. I'm very, very, very grateful. Okay, anyone else have a comment, question, awareness, and insight, and aha?
Robin, I have a question.
Yes, please, Barbara.
I am curious, how far in advance do you plan your day, your days, or weeks?
Okay, I am so glad you asked that, because one of the things I didn't get into today, because we don't have that much time, but one of the things that made a huge difference in my life is learning how to plan. And ideally, what Stephen recommends, if you do to-do lists, and a lot of people live in to-do lists, guess what? You're in quadrant 1. And, that's how a lot of people live their lives. If you plan on a monthly basis, it's too big and too many changes, and always plan in pencil. So Stephen recommended weekly planning. And breaking it down even further, and this is a whole nother training, is really to define the different roles you have in your life. And we all have several roles. We have the role of either a parent, a spouse, a sibling. We have our business role. We have a community role. We have a sibling role. And to look at each one of those roles and put goals connected to each one of those roles, and on a weekly basis to do something that moves you towards that goal. So for instance, I'll just give an example that was so present with me when I was doing this work. And when I really lived this, I was more balanced and had more freedom than I'd ever had in my life when I did this kind of planning. And, I looked at the important relationships. Well, one of them was I was a granddaughter, and I had 2 grandmothers alive at the time. Well, it's a quadrant 2 to take the time to pick up the phone or to send a card to my grandmothers. And I did that on a weekly basis. And so that really made a huge difference to them. Last night, I called my cousin. It was her birthday, and her husband's elderly. And I really make a point of it to stay connected. And it doesn't take long, but that's a quadrant 2. It's important relationships, but you plan it in your week. And so you take a look at all the different roles you have and the goals within each one of those roles, and you do something every week to move you forward on those. So Stephen says, always plan in pencil and plan on a weekly basis, and make sure you're attending to the quadrant 2s in each one of those roles every week. Does that help?
And let me just add to that, because, I was at the epitome of success back in the early 90s. And about the 3rd time I heard about the 7 Habits, I finally went and bought the book. I got so inspired. I flew to Southern California, did a weekend seminar in the 7 Habits, and it changed my life. That whole concept of roles and goals, because at that point I had one role. It was all business. I was a one-spoked wheel, all about business. I had neglected my health, my family, my religion, but I was really successful. Okay. But so it helped me bring my life into balance. And I remember the quote, plan weekly, implement daily. And that was a shift because I worked with to-do lists. And as Robin liked to say, I had so many to-do lists, I was stuck in the do-dos, but when I stepped back and did a weekly planning on Monday, and I was doing it on Sunday evening, I was planning out my week, and in implementing what I was doing made a huge difference for me. And I kind of got my life back in control and in balance.
Right. That is a powerful story that Gregory just shared. And we used to have a leadership program where we take a group of leaders from all over the country to Sundance, Robert Redford's resort, with Stephen Covey and a lot of the other presenters. And what Gregory shared is what we would hear all the time. And the most important thing about all of this, this is habit 1 and habit 2, is really taking the time to identify what are your most important values. Because if we live congruently with what's important to us, we're going to be living in quadrant 2. So taking the time to identify what are those most important values and how do they relate to each one of your roles, and how do you schedule your life to fit in what is most important. If health is most important, you've got to make sure you're scheduling things. It should be most important for everybody, but sometimes it isn't. So I'm noticing that time, it went really, really, really fast. Any other final comments or questions from anybody? Michelle, you've got your hand up. You want to unmute?
Yes. Hi, Robin.
Hi.
This is actually not specific to this, but I don't know when else to ask you and Gregory this question. Several people in my downline and myself, how are we going to get to the Zoom for this Saturday's training in Scottsdale? What's the Zoom link?
Live Younger Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Live Younger Zoom. Okay. I thought so. Thank you.
Yes.
And
Okay.
we will be sending out a notice later today about tomorrow's 30 minutes of wisdom, that was pre-recorded, but it's going to be played live at 9 a.m. from the airport. Robin and I will be at the airport waiting on our plane to fly to Arizona, but we'll be playing it tomorrow. And preview, I got to tell you, it's hard to say which is the best 30 minutes of wisdom, but this one, it's going to have you smiling and laughing, with profundities. Okay. And anyway.
And you can get a sneak preview on Facebook Live, like several of you had. So I want to close with the invitation that I presented before, is to really, really, if you're serious about this, pay attention. Do a journal of how you're spending your time, and then write down which quadrant it is. Just be totally honest with yourself, because the more honest you are with yourself, because the more you can say no to quadrant 3 and 4, the more you say yes to quadrant 2, the greater leverage you have, the less emergencies you're going to have, and the greater accomplishments of really living your life in alignment with what is most important to you. So that's my invitation to everyone. Really, have a little journal, a little notepad or something to say, okay, the last half hour I spent doing X. And then at the end of the day, or while you're doing it, you can say, what quadrant was that? And if you have a question about it, feel free to ask. And I'm here and available, because this is a game changer. This is a life changer. You will have tremendous benefits in the quality of your life. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. This is wonderful to be with you and share something that is deep in my heart and really, really made a huge difference in my life, as I hope it will for you. And I invite you to be a student of it and dig a little deeper too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
God bless. Thank you.
So great.
Thanks. Have a good trip.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much needed.
Wonderful training. Have a good trip. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.